G'day Jafffa Adventures, Terry King here. Welcome to the channel. I'm just in the process of pulling the sump plug out and draining the sump of oil. This is a regular oil change for me, but in this particular oil change, I'm going to pull the sump off. You want to find out why I'm going to pull the sump off my motor? Stick around. So what is this sump removal about anyway? Well, a fellow viewer just like you put me onto a video that explains this, and I'll drop a link to that video in the description below so you can check that out if you want. So first things first, thanks a million, John, for pointing this out to me. What I've got here in this bag is a genuine oil pickup from Toyota. So let's have a look at this. What Toyota have done in their infinite wisdom is they have employed a plastic oil pickup as opposed to a steel oil pickup, which used to be the norm in most vehicles. Inside this oil pickup tube is a very fine screen. That screen is also made of plastic. And what happens over time is this thing actually gets brittle and that screen breaks. And of course, when that happens, bits of that screen get sucked up into the oil pump and then distributed throughout the engine. It can block up oil galleries, and it is known to cause engine failures. So before that happens, I'm going to replace this oil pickup. It's a pretty simple task. You pull the sump off, you take the two bolts off of the old one, replace it with the new one, put the sump back on, and Bob's your uncle. And it's a reasonably cheap exercise as well. I bought that strainer directly from the dealer, and it cost me $55. If you want to get one yourself, the part number is 15104-51030. And it's called Strainer Subassembly. Again, I'd just like to thank John for putting me onto this. And that just demonstrates the power of social media. There's good in social media and there's bad. And this is the good side, the information sharing side. So if you've been checking out Jafffa Adventures and you haven't subscribed and you've just been freeloading, consider subscribing and commenting, because I read all of those comments and you can bet your bottom dollar that most viewers will also scroll through those comments. So if you've got some quality information, this is a perfect opportunity to share it. Besides, nobody likes a freeloader, do they? All right, let's go pull the sump off and see what we can find. Now, before I pull that sump off, I'm actually going to replace this oil filter, and I'm going to put the sump plug back in the bin. And I'm just going to get some parts cleaner. Wash this filter housing down. If you do this, make sure you get all of this brake cleaner dried off and out of here before you screw this housing back in. You don't want brake cleaner circulating through your oil system. I don't know what it would do, but what I do know is it doesn't have a whole lot of great lubricating properties. Okay, I got a cap full of new motor oil here. We'll just put a little bit of that oil on this seal and run this seal down on the filter housing. Make sure you get that seal in the right groove. There's a groove right here at the bottom of the threads. That's not it. You want to go down one lower to the next groove. There we go, just like that. Then we get our new filter element. Doesn't matter which end you put on first, but what is absolutely critical is that you make sure that that steel sleeve is there. If that steel sleeve isn't there, you will destroy your motor. Clicks in place like that. Now we can screw it into the bottom of the block. All right, screw our housing back in place. You can see that I've got one of these aluminum housings. That's actually off a 79 Series Landcruiser. That part is interchangeable with the 200. The 200 series has a Bakelite filter housing. I'm not keen on that one because if it ever broke in the bush, you could never repair it. All right, that filter housing is in place. Finished. Now we'll move on to our sump plug. A little bit of oil dribbling out of that sump, but not enough to worry me for when I pull it off. Okay, time to pull the sump off, and it is just held on with a series of 10mm bolts. And they are not tight at all. These are what the little suckers look like. And they've got some silicone on the threads, so that sump is held in place with a little bit of goo. Okay, now that I've got those bolts out of there, I'm going to go around and hit this with a brake clean. Okay, that was the easy part, I'm sure. Now I'm going to go along with a razor blade and just try and cut through this silicone as best I can before prying on that sump. Like most sumps, this Toyota sump is just thin pressed steel. So if you pry on it, it will bend that mating surface. Now you can bash them into shape again, but I'd rather not go down that track if I can help it. Well, I've been at it for about 10 minutes, and I've gone around the perimeter with a razor blade, and we have got our sump off. And there is our oil pickup. Just going to let the rest of the oil drain out of that pickup. While that's draining, what do we got in there? That's obviously our pickup. That little guy there is the oil level sensor, and that's about all I can see in there. Obviously, when we put this back together, I've got to clean up this mating surface and clean up the mating surface on the oil pan as well. Okay, I am now going to pull this old pickup off so that I can clear a path to be able to clean this gasket off the block area. Both those bolts holding that pickup on were identical in size. And I'm assuming we just pull him out. Twist and pull, just like that. Now, because I'm a curious individual, I'm going to cut this old pickup open and see what's inside of it. There we have it. It's just a giant screen. So mine's got some crap on it, but it's just the dags that's collected when I cut that off. And my screen's fully intact, but boy, these are brittle. So if I take a screwdriver and push it in that screen, look at that. It just falls apart. Like, that is seriously crunchy. I can see and understand what happens with these over time. That just gets brittle, and this screen falls apart and gets sucked up into the oil pump. Wow. Okay, well, I'm going to add that to my list of service items. Well, I've got 250,000 kilometers on the car now. I probably would have done that sooner had I known that it gets as crunchy as it is. I probably would have done that at the 100,000 mark, maybe every 100,000 kilometers. Incredible. Here's something pretty interesting. The sump plug on the 200 is not on the very bottom of the pan. It actually sits on the side. So there's always oil left inside of your sump after you drain the oil. So I'm just going to catch that and measure it. The other thing you want to do is, if you're doing this, is you want to inspect the bottom of this pan and see whether there's anything laying in the bottom of it. And for that reason, just don't go and dump it out into your waste container straight away, because there'll be some telltale stuff on the bottom of the sump if there's any engine problems. That's about 800 mil of oil that sits in the bottom of your sump after you drain it. Far out. That's a lot of dirty oil still in there. Now, in the bottom of my sump, it's black, so it's really difficult to see, but it is super clean. There's nothing in there at all, which of course is just the way we like to see it. No metal shavings, no bits of silicone in there. There's just nothing. That's brilliant. Super stoked with that. Now I'll just take my razor blade and cut off this excess silicone that's sitting on the inside of the pan. And then I'll take this onto the wire wheel and clean it off completely. That's a reasonable chunk of silicone. Okay, what's the cheapest solvent you can get? That's right, petrol. Cheaper than water. So I'll clean this sump up using petrol and a brush for starters. Now I've got a brand new razor blade, and I'm just going along this machine surface on the bottom of the block and cleaning off all of the old RTV. Whatever you do, don't take a wire wheel to this machine surface. All you do is put scratches in it, and that'll give you a potential for a leak. Nice brand new clean razor blade is all that you need. Have a look up inside that motor. It's got 250,000 kilometers on it. You can see the bottom of the crank there. You can see a couple of con rods. One's got an 8 and a 2 stamped on it. Look at how clean they are. There's no discoloration to that whatsoever. The cleanliness of those internals is the result of an oil change every 5,000 kilometers, religiously. I'm stoked with that. Okay, time to install our new pickup. Got a little bit of motor oil here, new motor oil. Just gonna run it over this O-ring. Ultimately, it'll be bathed in oil, so that'll be great, but this will just help it slide in place, I think. Okay, Mr. New Oil Pickup. The two bolts are identical in size, so you can't screw them up. And you can't put the pickup around the wrong way either. So it's pretty idiot proof in that respect. That's it, pickup done. That surface is all cleaned. I wiped that down with Carby cleaner as well. Ready to bolt that sump up. Okay, here's my final clean down of the sump. Just with a little bit of Carby cleaner or throttle body and Carby cleaner. Get any last residuals of any sort of contamination out of there. The Carby cleaner that's running out of there is nice and clear. I got myself a white rag to clean this thing off with, and a different white rag to do the inside of the sump. Now I'll let that Carby cleaner volatilize off on its own before I hit this sump with some compressed air and blow out any little impurities that might be hanging about. Now before I blow that out, I'll just take a straight edge and run it along the pan and see whether I have deformed it at all when I took it off. I don't believe I have because I didn't pry it that hard, but it's a good double check to do. Remember, there is no gasket here, it's just the goo that you're putting in there. That's good. She's dead flat, just like it came off. There we go, that sump is absolutely spotless. I would use that as a soup bowl. If you're not prepared to use yours as a soup bowl, it's not clean enough. Keep going. Okay, time to lay our bead of gasket maker down. All right, I'm just gonna put a little bit on both sides of these bowl holes. There we have it. Time to pop that sump in situ. Just double checking, those two bolts are down and nice and tight. We got our two locating studs. That mating surface has all been cleaned up, and of course our sump is all gooed up. So it's time to put her in place. Start the two 10mm nuts to hold it there. Okay, now we can start our bolts. Alright, time to tighten these down with a ratchet. I'm sure they have a torque specification. I don't know what it is, but I took note of how tight they were when I was taking them off, so that when I put them back on, I'll take them down to that same tightness. It's not technical, but it does work. I'm going now on opposite sides of the pan as I tighten these bolts up. Okay, that sump is all torqued down now. I've got just the perfect amount of goo seeping out past the sides. That's pretty much the way it looked when it came out of the factory. So I'm stoked with that. I'll let that glue set off for 24 hours, fill the sump up with oil, and kick her in the guts. Well, that was a really easy job, and am I glad I did it? Hell yeah. I could not believe how brittle that strainer was. I'm so glad bits of that didn't break off and get inside any oil galleries. Far out. I trust you found some value in that. There is over 30 videos in the 200 series maintenance playlist if you want to have a look at there for other stuff just like this. Coming up in a future video, I'm going to be installing a brand new one of these. Until then, everyone, keep the shiny side up. Bye now. Look at that. It just falls apart.